What's good folks, it's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video. This video is about melees, not a simple one, as this will serve to be a detailed guide on melee modding and the fundamental use of each loadout. I will go over how damage is calculated and how it affects your melee when modded along with different types of damage multipliers, especially why certain mods are used over others, and hopefully it will be easy for you to distinguish a good melee build from a bad one. As everyone learns and understands things at a different pace, I do want to make this guide even more welcoming to all types of players. There will be timestamps for each section of the guide. Use them wisely. Let's begin with the term multipliers. I want you to think of every mod you place onto your weapon as a multiplier, multiplying the base 100% value of the weapon. And as they are multipliers, you can apply them in any order when calculating your total damage. There are many, but to keep it simple, here are the basic ones: base damage, elemental damage, crit damage, faction damage, and status chance. There are few terms that you will need to understand before moving on. One of the most popular ones is being additive to each other or additive damage. People confuse this term way too much. When someone mentions additive, they're referring to the addition between two mods or arcanes with the same type of multiplier or description, to keep it simple. To give an example, let's take the mod Primed Pressure Point, which is a base damage multiplier. When we add a mod or arcane with the same description, they are additive to each other, meaning that if we were to add, say, Condition Overload and Spoiled Strike, these mod stats will simply add to the Prime Pressure Point's stats. And this is where a new term comes into play: Diminishing Returns. To keep it simple, too much of one thing will give you little to no beneficial increase to your damage, as modding your weapon is similar to applying butter on toast. You want to evenly spread that butter so you get a nice bite no matter where you take a bite. Now that's out of the way, let's take a look at the main multipliers. In order for you to calculate the base damage, elemental damage, you first have to convert the percentage of the mod into a multiplier state and simply add a 1. This way, it'll be easier for you to determine the final value of your weapon's modded stats. So, for example, if we wanted to figure out our base damage multiplier when modding with a rank 10 prime pressure point, you take the 165% value, convert it into a decimal, which is 1.65, and add a 1. So our base damage multiplier will equal to 2.65 times. So, when you apply Prime Pressure Point to your weapon, what you're really doing is multiplying the base stats of the weapon by 2.65. Equipping Prime Pressure Point onto Paracesis, which has a base damage value of 222, we multiply that by 2.65. We would end up with a total damage of 588.3. And this applies to all weapons. But there is a base damage multiplier which cannot be seen on the modding screen, but it is a greater boon to your base damage: Condition Overload. This increases your base damage based on the number of unique status effects on the target. Notice how when we equip this mod, the base damage isn't affected at all, because it will only take effect if enemies are applied with status effects. With one status effect, you get 80%, which is quite low, but with 4 on a target, you've already surpassed Prime Pressure Point's base damage with 320%. Now that you know how to calculate base damage, let's learn how to do that by applying an elemental damage multiplier. But first, you must understand elemental damage. Elemental damage multipliers are comprised of elemental damage and physical damage mods. These all have their unique effects and attributes when applying status effects and when dealing damage. Elemental damage mods apply a new instance of damage that will be present on your base damage, and this also scales off the total modded base damage. As base damage and elemental damage mods are two different multipliers, they multiply together, increasing your overall damage. Another great thing about elemental mods is that you can combine two individual elemental mods to form a new element with its own attributes and effects. However, all of this is different when talking about physical damage mods, as they do not scale off of the total modded base damage. Rather, they scale off the modded base damage of the physical damage type being modded. That also must be present on the weapon. That was a lot of words. Meaning, if there is no slash damage on the weapon and you apply a slash mod, that slash mod will do nothing for the weapon. Before we go any further, let's discuss modded base damage, as this is a new term that might confuse some people. Modded base damage is self-explanatory. It's base damage that has been modified by mods or arcanes. Two of the multipliers that I've talked about just now factor into this. Those are base damage mods and elemental damage mods. When you apply these multipliers to your weapon's 100% base value in any order, you will end up with the modded base damage value. Okay, now let's learn how to calculate the accumulated multiplier of prime pressure points with either a 90% or a 165% elemental mod. And this method also applies to all weapons. Using the same weapon, we take our base damage and the 90% elemental damage mod and turn both of those into multipliers, which is 2.65 and 1.9. Multiplying the two gets you 5.035. And now take that 5.035 and multiply it with the weapon's base damage, and you get the result of 1,117.77. And Warframe will run that off to the highest number, making it a 0.8. Same thing when using a 165% elemental damage mod. It will be 2.65 times 2.65, and you will get 7.0225. Take that and multiply it with your base damage, and you get 1,558.995. So, no matter what weapon you choose out of your arsenal, the combination of these two mods will always be 5.035 or 7.0225 times the base damage of the weapon. Certain elemental damage that you proc on enemies apply a DOT, aka damage over time. Damage over time is applied when proccing the following status effects: slash, toxin, heat, gas, and electric. Slash, heat, and toxin are all single target DOTs and have their damage start ticking 6 times after a 1-second delay for a total of 6 seconds. Electric and gas, however, do not have a delay. They are instantaneous and are both AoE, and also tick 6 times over 6 seconds. Heat, toxin, and electric procs all scale off modded base damage, faction damage, and the respective modded elemental damage. So this means adding more of the same element will multiply the damage over time of that element. If you're calculating heat, toxin, or electric, you need to know not only the modded base damage and faction damage, but also the amount of heat, toxin, or electric we've added to the weapon. While slash and gas procs only scale off of the modded base damage, faction damage, and do not scale up the respective modded elemental damage type, which means slash mods like Buzzkill do not affect the slash procs or the bleeds, but only slash damage and increase its proc priority. And adding more toxin and heat does not affect gas procs, but only the initial gas damage. Now for the new people who just started hearing the term proc, procs, and procking. Proc is a common video game term used to refer to an event triggered under particular circumstances. In this case, when talking about elemental damage, it's the chance to apply a particular status effect when damaging with a corresponding elemental damage type. For example, slash damage has a chance to apply, or in this case, proc, bleeds, which deals damage over time directly to the health, bypassing armor. Elemental damage and their status effects are two different things. As shown earlier, they are part of the same element but provide different benefits. And this is a good segue into status chance. This modifier refers to the probability of you applying a status effect with a weapon strike. So, a weapon that is modded for corrosive has a chance to proc corrosion and reduce the target's armor value. This probability can be increased by many factors, easily done by modifying the status chance values when using Weeping Wounds or elemental damage mods that have dual stats, giving you both damage and increasing the probability of applying a status effect of that modded element, or just by simply hitting the target multiple times really fast. On the topic of modding for status chance, Weeping Wounds allows you to increase your status chance when you build up your combo counter. Don't worry, I will touch upon combos a lot more in depth later. Basically, by hitting the enemies a lot, you build up combo. Weeping Wounds will begin to give you the bonus once you hit 2 times combo, and gradually increasing the higher you go to hit its maximum value. Once you hit 12 times combo, you'll receive the full benefits of Weeping Wounds, which is 440% status chance, making that a 5.40 times your status chance. Applying it to the base status chance of Paracesis, you will gain 118.8% status chance. When a weapon achieves 100% status chance, each hit may apply additional status effects. The types of each proc is independently drawn, so it is possible to apply the same status effect several times in one hit. This is also known as multi-proccing. The independently drawn status effects is determined by which damage type has the highest modifier. So this means if the slash damage on your weapon has a higher number, that damage type will have a higher chance to proc its status effects over the course of each hit. This term is known as Proc Priority. So, if you were modding for a viral and slash build, but your viral elemental damage combination was higher than the slash, then the viral damage will proc way more than the slash, making the build far weaker if enemies have armor. Status application is varied as there are several ways to proc status effects without needing to worry about status chance, and one of them is called Forced Procs. Forced Procs are guaranteed status application that are separate from your status chance, meaning even if you have 0% status chance, you will still get a status proc from your weapon's attack, which is commonly found in stances and heavy attacks. Faction damage mods. To newer and average players, this may look like a scam. When you compare this to Prime Pressure Point, it's clearly lower in damage, but that's also DE's fault with their horrible wording. Notice when you equip a faction mod, nothing happens to the base damage of your modding screen because this isn't a base damage multiplier, so not the same as primed pressure point. But yes, it does in fact increase your damage in a way that it's calculated as a total damage multiplier against the faction you're modding for. Not only that, it multiplies itself a second time to damage over time status effects inflicted by your weapon. This is known as double dipping. This term is commonly mentioned when talking about faction damage and how it interacts with DOTs. So what essentially is happening is that the stat is being applied twice. For example, if we have a 55% faction damage mod on our weapon, when calculating how much a slash proc would do, instead of only multiplying the damage by 55%, the DOT will be multiplied a second time by 55%. So that would look like 1.55 times 1.55, which equals to 2.4025. And now you're dealing 2.4 times the damage with the DOT, and this is known as double dipping. So do not underestimate the power of faction damage. And if you apply faction damage mod with a Riven having the same faction multiplier, those two will be additive to each other as they are the same multiplier. Now, everyone's favorite topic, crits, critical chance, and critical damage multiplier. To summarize, just like status chance, critical chance is the probability that any damage that you deal will be a critical hit. Very simple. However, crit damage multiplies your total damage if and only when you land a critical hit. Looking at the Paracesis with 31% crit chance, this is going to give my strikes 31% chance to crit whenever we deal damage. Notice when I crit, I deal yellow numbers, and my non-crits are small white numbers. And when I proc a status effect, the damage over time is the small white numbers, because status effect damage over time cannot crit, but the damage is affected by crits. I will explain. Crits can be quite confusing to people because of the tiers of crit chance they are. Because in Warframe, crit chance changes your damage output and color the higher a critical tier you go. Tier 1 crits are the yellow numbers that you see from 1 to 100%. Tier 2 are the orange numbers when you go over 100% all the way up to 200%. Tier 3 is when you're going 201% and over. Calculating the crit chance can be done the same way as base damage multiplier. Sacrificial steel, which is 220%, just like every other multiplier, turn it into a decimal. And now let's multiply that with Paracelsus' base crit chance, which is 31%, and you will get 99.2% crit chance. It's the same formula with critical damage, but crit damage is kept in a multiplier state, which makes it easier for you to look at in the modding screen. And the reason your DOTs are affected by crits, because crits will increase the damage that your weapons deal substantially. And since they multiply your overall damage when you crit, that also increases the damage your DOTs will do. Modding Organ Shatter on my Paracelsus will now allow my crits to deal 4.9 times the damage. But take note, damage in actual missions will vary because of the enemy resistances and levels, as they also factor into your damage output. Just like Weeping Wounds increases status chance with combo counter, there is a crit chance mod that increases your crit chance with combo. Just like Weeping Wounds, you will only notice the full potential once you reach 12 times combo. And with it, you also get a 5.40 multiplier. Applying that to Paracelsus grants you 167.4% crit chance. This means you'll be consistently yellow critting while orange critting 67% of the time. And when your weapons crit above 100%, it has a chance to deal increased critical damage. Even though this is the case, there's diminishing returns to this. Adding too much crit chance with lower critical multiplier won't give you a larger boost as you think it would. Finding a balance between high crits with a decently high critical multiplier is what you need. For example, if you're critting 100% of the time, it is best to multiply the damage your crits deal rather than focus too much on increasing the critical tier. Forcing red crits at the cost of other multipliers will kill your damage potential. However, some weapons can easily achieve red and orange crits without sacrificing mod space, and this allows them to greatly increase their damage potential and scaling. Now that I've gone over modular multipliers, it's time I talk about utility mods and passive multipliers. While guns come with an additional slot called the Exilus, Melee's additional slot is actually way more important, as it's the stand slot. Not only does it give you more mod capacity, it affects your damage as it provides hit multipliers, force proccing a particular status effect, helps build up more combo with multi-hit strikes, and also affects your swing speed. For more information about stances, I have a video dedicated to the best stances for every melee archetype. Here we are at combo counter and combo multiplier. Building up combo is an essential part of melee attacks, as there are 3 types of melee attacks: light attacks, heavy attacks, and aerial attacks. Light attacks allow you to build up combo by hitting enemies. If you do not hit any enemy within a certain period, you will lose all the combo buildup, while heavy attacks consume combo for more damage, and aerial attacks just benefit. There are mods that only scale from combo counter buildup, as they start to take effect at 2 times combo. These also benefit the other types of attacks. Focus schools, arcanes, and even mods exist to prevent combo counter from fully disappearing. Heavy attacks gain a 1-to-1 damage multiplier increase as they build up combo. This means if you hit 12 times combo, you will get 12 times the damage. The damage buff applies a multiplicative bonus to the heavy attacks. There are 2 types of heavy attacks. The basic pure heavy, which utilizes initial combo. Initial combo is a mod that grants you built-up combo counter but reduces your combo build-up potential. And the second heavy attack type is the hybrid combo heavy, which has you build up combo then release a more powerful heavy attack. The basic pure heavy is a more simple build approach, where unfortunately some weapon loadouts will begin to fall off, while combo heavy utilizes a bit more and has higher scaling potential. Both types of heavy attacks use the built-in heavy attack stats on the weapon. These stats dictate the total heavy attack damage which will be inflicted on a target upon the use of a heavy attack. Pay attention to the heavy slam attack. You won't generally mod for this stat unless you're able to increase the damage multipliers from abilities, arcanes, and weapons designed for this, like the Arca Titron. as this stat doesn't scale as well as the traditional heavy attack damage because you can't boost it with crits or combo multipliers, and the slam radius cannot be increased and doesn't scale with range mods. When heavy attacking, each weapon will have a force status proc, regardless of the weapon stance. So there are weapons that force proc slash to bleed enemies, and these weapons have the ability to scale with pure heavy attack builds, and even combo heavy builds. Slash is weak against armor, but its status effect bleed ignores armor and deals damage directly to the health, hence why they tend to scale better. For example, the strongest slash heavy attack weapons are scythes and two-handed nakanas, since they give you a 6 times guaranteed slash multiplier on the first hits. But other guaranteed slash weapons are also very powerful. Even though you lose combo in each heavy attack, combo heavy builds utilize combo efficiency. This allows you to reduce the cost of combo consumption on heavy attacks, but still receive the full bonus damage. There are mods and warframe abilities that provide you with combo efficiency. Here is a stat on the weapon that can dictate damage distribution with each swing, the follow-through stat. This determines the damage each subsequent enemy receives when you hit more than one target in a single swing, as the damage begins to diminish as you hit more than one target. For example, a weapon with 0.6 follow-through, which means 60% of the damage will be followed through. So what essentially is happening is that the first target will receive 100% of the damage, while the second will take 60%, which is 0.6 times the damage of your initial hit. As the swing moves to the third target, they will have that 60% reduced by 60% to get a 0.36 times the damage, and so on and so forth. Each hit reduced by 0.6. And you will have some people argue to never mod for range on a melee because it reduces the damage thanks to the follow-through stat being very low. Here is where that will make sense outside of the usual case scenarios. 1. Grouping abilities from warframes and even Tenno arcanes. If enemies are grouped up, you don't need range, as it's easier to hit multiple targets without the need for you to chase each individual target. Number 2. Prioritizing single target damage, like in Disruption. Number 3. Thrown melee. The melee is a projectile, so range is a dead stat for these weapons. Range is a crucial stat to increase on traditional melee weapons. It allows you to hit more enemies with a single swing, increasing the potential to build up combo faster. This also means increasing your kills per minute as you're hitting more than one enemy. You're able to strike foes before they hit you. Warframe is a game where you're killing hordes of enemies. There are very few game modes where that's not the case. And if your primary source of damage is a melee, you have to optimize your killing potential. And now onto attack speed. Attack speed is a very simple concept to understand. You're just hitting things faster. Hitting things faster also increases your damage per second, and as you're hitting things faster, you're increasing the probability of you proccing more status effects. Here is a passive multiplier achieved by just not alerting the enemy, or by remaining undetected. Stealth multipliers. This multiplier allows you to do 700% more damage with your melee. Including your equipped mods, your melee hits will give you a multiplier based on your weapon's level, starting off at a 2 times bonus damage at level 0, going up by 0.2 times every level till it caps out at 8 times the damage at level 30. This damage is easily achieved when stealthed, hence the name. Even if you do lose stealth and the enemies are alerted to you, you're still able to regain stealth multipliers if you go invisible and the enemy loses sight of you and your presence. The only part that can be confusing to people is that when you deal stealth damage, it appears as a tier 1 crit, even though it's not. However, if you do land a critical hit, the crit will be additive to the stealth multiplier. Since we're in the stealth multiplier section, this will also tie into finishers. There are 3 types of finishers that apply when using a melee weapon. Stealth finishers, directional finishers aka front and back finishers, and lastly, ground finishers. Stealth finishers are available when enemies are in an unalerted state and you're presented with a prompt as you approach behind them. Directional finishers are finishers that have no prompt, but are from enemies being made vulnerable from warframe abilities, weapon stagger, and arcanes. For example, the Za Arcane Exodia Hunt staggers enemies, pulling them in towards you, but also have them vulnerable to directional finishers. The damage you deal to enemies with these two types of finishers is true damage, which is a type of damage that ignores all forms of defenses and attacks the health directly. This damage can be further increased by making the health vulnerable with viral procs, which provides you with a 4.25 health damage multiplier. Finisher damage scales off your modded base damage, finisher damage mods, weapon type, and stealth bonus. Speaking of modded base damage, the elemental and physical damage mods present on your builds only provide you with a 50% bonus. The finisher animation speed is fixed regardless of the weapon's base stats, but you can increase its animation by using an attack speed mod, but only up to a 50% bonus speed and nothing more. This means a Prime Fury and you're good to go. Finishers are considered as a regular melee strike and also help you build up combo. Now lastly, ground finishers. These finishers, however, are very different from the other two, and are only available when enemies are knocked down by a melee stance combo, arcane, or literally anything. All you have to do is approach them and perform a regular melee attack, and this attack is classified as a ground finisher. Ground finishers don't deal true damage, but the multipliers come from your weapon's modded base damage and weapon type, as weapons like claws, fists, and sparring weapons gain the highest ground finisher multiplier. After that long discussion about melee multipliers, hopefully you've come to understand how the melee functions. If you did miss anything, please go through the timestamps. Right now, I'll be going over how to mod melees. These melee builds are more focused towards steel path, not baby path. So if you want to optimize your damage, pay attention. To maintain the combo counter for the melee builds, you can use the primary and secondary dexterity arcanes on your guns. The other method is using the Naramon Focus School, thanks to its power spike node. I'll be using the Paracesis as my template. The first set of builds will be slash based, pretty much anything that has slash as its primary damage source. And these first set of slash builds are going to be combo light attack builds. Unlike guns, we don't have base damage arcanes, so we do have to pay attention more to what kind of mods we place onto the melee. Starting off with base damage will be Condition Overload. A reminder, multiple unique status effects on a target will increase the base damage of the melee. And since this weapon is very high in the crit chance department, I'm going to take advantage of that with Blood Rush. Blood Rush builds crit chance when you build up your combo, and at max combo we'll have 167% crit chance. And since we're critting 100% of the time, we want to multiply the damage we deal when we crit, and that's why I will equip Organ Shatter. And because slash is my main damage source, I want to proc this slash way more than anything else. So to increase the status chance, I will be using Weeping Wounds. And to hit multiple enemies so they can all bleed, I will equip Primed Reach. This extends the range of my melee strikes so I can hit more enemies. And because I want to hit more enemies faster, I will increase my attack speed. Now, there are 3 attack speed mods that you can use. For example, if you're doing survival missions, cascade missions where enemies will be spawning very frequent, I suggest using Berserker. This gives you a larger attack speed multiplier. But if you're in a mission that has a lot of downtime, Prime Fury is the next best thing. However, if you do not have Prime Fury, Quickening is the attack speed mod you want to equip. But right now, let's say we're fighting against corrupted units or Grineer units. We want to multiply all that damage that we're dealing to them and double dip with the bleeds. So I will equip a faction mod. And now we're left with a flex slot. This flex slot can be more multipliers, as in more crit damage, more attack speed, or even more range. Now for those who are wondering, how am I going to proc viral on the enemies? There is no viral damage on this build. Well, that's where a utility weapon comes into play, a primer of sorts. You have two amazing options, the Kuva Nucor and the Epitaph. The Epitaph provides force procs, meaning on its quick tap fire, you will get blast and cold, slowing down enemies and also reducing their accuracy, along with your modded elements. In this case, I have viral and heat. 10 stacks of viral will allow my bleeds to deal 325% more damage. As we're proccing the force procs and modded elements on this weapon, we're essentially increasing our base damage on condition overload. However, if we want to build for an elemental damage over time, well, it's very simple. For gas, we will have our dual elemental slots. However, you may notice now we're missing attack speed. You can outsource that to your Warframe Arcane and Warframe abilities. But now, what if you want to mod for a corrosive build? That is very simple. All you have to do is replace the heat mod with an electric mod and drop Weeping Wounds, because you don't need to go over 100% with corrosive damage. It's a burst damage build. You're going to be building for raw damage. In this case, the final mod can be an attack speed mod, or if you're outsourcing your attack speed, add more multipliers. Now that you've gotten a solid idea on how to mod for combo light attacks, let's take a look at heavy attacks. Just like combo light attacks, you can mod for condition overload if the weapon wasn't AoE, like the Glaive. However, if you want to make this a simple heavy loadout, go with Prime Pressure Point or Sacrificial Pressure. And for the crit chance, mod Sacrificial Steel, because when these two are combined, you increase the crit chance and the base damage. However, for weapons that are very powerful in crit chance, you don't necessarily have to go with Sacrificial Pressure, and I suggest to go for more damage. And because this is a pure heavy build, we need to have initial combo. And that's where Corrupt Charge comes in. Now we're going to have 2 times initial combo, basically having our heavy attacks deal 2 times the damage. Heavy attacks have 2 types of attack speed increases. It's main attack speed and wind-up speed. The lower the wind-up speed, the faster you release your heavy attack. So we need to reduce that. And I will equip Amalgam Organ Shatter. This gives us crit damage and it reduces our wind-up speed. As you see, we went from 1.1 to 0.7. However, there's another mod to increase our wind-up speed and base damage. Here we have Killing Blow. This increases our heavy attack base damage and reduces wind-up speed a bit more, maxing out at 0.5. This is the lowest you can go. And now depends on what type of weapon you're building this heavy attack on. If it's any of the heavy attack weapons that force proc slash, you don't need to equip elements. So let's just start off with that. Our faction mod to double dip on the force proc bleeds. And now we have 2 slots left. I would suggest equipping more attack speed if the weapon does feel slow to heavy attack with. However, if you're outsourcing your attack speed yet again, go with more multipliers. You have Gladiator Might, and then the last mod can be any other utility mod. For example, a Glaive Prime. Notice how my last mod is the Volatile Quick Return. If you want a different multiplier, you can equip Power Throw. This gives you a final damage multiplier on your thrown attack. Back to other weapons. As I said, this last mod can be whatever you want. If you're grouping enemies, go with anything else. If you're not grouping enemies, you want to hit more, equip Range. Remember, you need to hit more enemies to kill faster, and heavy attack builds are effectively slower than light attack builds. And now, let me show you combo heavy builds. Notice how I removed all the other mods and we're left with Amalgam Organ Shatter, our faction mod, and Range. And Range is also interchangeable at this point, especially if you're using the Amar set to teleport when you heavy attack. So instead of Sacrificial Steel, we will be using Blood Rush because we're building combo yet again. And if we're priming enemies, meaning applying status effects on the targets, use Condition Overload. However, if you're not, stick to Prime Pressure Points. And now that I want to build up combo faster and attack faster, the best mod would be Quickening, as Quickening gives me that attack speed and combo count chance. And now we're left with 2 mod slots. Reflex Coil is going to be my heavy attack efficiency, so I don't drain as much combo when I heavy attack. And the final multiplier, of course, will be Gladiator Might. However, if you want more damage, I highly suggest replacing Prime Pressure Point with Condition Overload. This has a higher damage scaling, because when you build up combo, you're also getting a damage multiplier on your heavy attack, increasing your base damage to the next level with multiple status procs on enemies and unleash that swing onto them. However, if you're teleporting with the Amar set, you can drop out Primed Reach for another multiplier. You can either go with more crit chance, more attack speed. However, if the weapon is slash based and also force proc slash, I highly suggest Weeping Wounds, because now you're bleeding enemies as you're building up combo, and when you heavy attack, you're also force procking bleeds. And since you're over 100% status chance, you're also multi-procking those bleeds, so way more damage. This is especially great in Disruption. However, if your weapon doesn't force proc slash, you will have to mod for elements. In this case, replace Reflex Coil and Gladiator Might for elements. That's easily done by putting Fever Strike as your Toxin mod and Focus Energy as your heavy attack efficiency mod and element. If you want to run other elements and you're grouping up enemies, especially with gas, you can remove Primed Reach. Change Focus Energy to Reflex Coil and put a Heat mod. Gas spreads out to 3 meters on each enemy hit, so you can spawn several clouds hitting all the grouped up enemies. Okay, now onto the last type of build, Finisher builds. Very simple. We still have Blood Rush and the Faction mod. For base damage, we're going to use Primed Pressure Points. We don't need range, and attack speed is capped at 50%, so you can use Primed Fury or Quickening, because performing finishers will also grant you combo counter. For crit damage, we have Organ Shatter, elemental damage with Fever Strike, and Shocking Touch. And lastly, Finishing Touch for the finisher damage multiplier. A reminder, this is a template. For the best finisher damage results, the weapon does matter. Alright folks, that has been it from this ultimate in-depth melee guide. I worked hard on this just to help you guys understand more about melee and how to optimize your builds. Anyway, for those who've enjoyed and learned something from this video, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe. For more Warframe content, streams, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.